A radio show host in Seattle called Paul Gallant.
You are definitely living in the hindsight world today, Paul.
Do you feel there's been a consistent theme with the interceptions?
I think every interception really has a different story.
I was just kind of curious what Paul gets to say.
You got f***ing grow, mother. Are you kidding me?
Paul Gallant, what the hell is wrong with you?
Hello and welcome aboard another episode of the Gallant Says podcast, which you can watch live weekdays 1 to 1:30, give or take, Central Time, at twitch.tv/Gallant Says and youtube.com/Paul Gallant. You can also listen to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts: Apple, Google, Spotify, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. And if you haven't already, please subscribe, rate, and review. It is Thursday, February 16th of 2023. I'm really curious as to where Lamar Jackson is going to end up next year. And I feel like if you're the Houston Texans, at the very least, you have to make a phone call when you see these two stories. Two tidbits, one of them from the NFL Network. The Baltimore Ravens intend to keep Lamar Jackson, but they could be swayed to trade the former MVP with a Godfather offer. Guy's won the MVP already, but he's no Joe Flacco, I guess, to the Baltimore Ravens. If no long-term deal is reached, the Ravens would consider trading the 26-year-old quarterback for a, quote, windfall of draft picks, end quote. That's from Ian Rappaport, Tom Pelissero, and Mike Garofalo. Also, per Jordan Schultz of The Score, the Baltimore Ravens didn't provide full assurances that Lamar Jackson would return as the team's quarterback in 2023 while conducting offensive coordinator interviews. So they're unsure of what to do with him. Negotiations have been tricky. He wants a fully guaranteed contract. Baltimore's unwilling to give it to him, though they do want to pay him. So it seems like the two sides are split on a matter of principle, and Jackson has been, to this point at least, stubborn enough to say no to whatever Baltimore has been pushing, and the Ravens also have been stubborn. I don't blame them entirely given Jackson's playing style. Doesn't seem like the best idea to give a guy who is going to be possibly injured every single year, even if he is good at avoiding contact. He still was banged up the last couple of games of the year because his greatest strength is how awesome he is as a runner. He can throw the football, but he is unbelievable. Michael Vick level as far as a ball carrier, perhaps even better. He's very slippery in addition to being extremely fast. If you're the Texans, you got to pick up the phone and make a call. You actually have the resources to potentially trade for Lamar Jackson. And I don't know if he would be interested in coming here. I don't know if he would be interested in signing a long-term contract, but if you offer him fully guaranteed money, he might change his mind on that. You have a ton of first-round picks. You still have 2 next year. You have 2 this year. What's the harm in packaging some of them together to get someone like Lamar Jackson? Is it not more of a sure thing that you will get plus returns with your quarterback if you trade those picks for Jackson than it is if you roll the dice on one of these guys at the top of the draft? Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, Will Levis. And I know some people out there aren't the biggest Lamar Jackson fans, but I think you have to agree that he's at the very least a top 10 quarterback in this league. And there's a good chance that none of those 3 quarterbacks that I named, Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, Will Levis, will be that guy. So from a probability perspective, you could use all of those picks and build a roster and try to get yourself closer to where the Philadelphia Eagles were going into the Super Bowl, where you are a super duper loaded and deep team. But you also could use those picks to trade for a legitimate quarterback. Sid with a good point at youtube.com/Paul Gallant. Nick is old school. He will never offer anyone an all guaranteed contract. But I do think that he is operating in a different zone. As someone who grew up rooting for the New England Patriots and who's pretty familiar with the team, there is a case to be made that the Patriots are not as cash-strapped, despite having one of the more valuable franchises in the league, as some of the other teams. I think that in terms of overall spending, they're somewhere around like 13th, 14th, 15th. Bill Belichick made some passive-aggressive comments about it at the end of the year. I think he has more of a budget to work with, and I base that off of the fact that the Texans are paying multiple coaches contracts, and they're not even coaching the team anymore. I don't know if they're still paying Bill O'Brien, but I bet they're still paying David Culley, and I bet they're still paying Lovie Smith. Paul Lopa asks the question, Paul, what did you think about the Derek Stingley tweet? Interesting. Let me get to that. I did see a post about how Derek Stingley I guess, was on with Von Miller, and he endorsed the Texans drafting C.J. Stroud while on Von Miller's podcast. But the tweet that I see is an eyeball emojis to Patrick Queen. Patrick Queen retweeted it. Eyeball emoji, shrug emoji, but then afterwards tweeted, bruh, relax. Guys, I'm convinced that these people online are just fucking with us. Now, Roquan Smith did sign that big contract with the Baltimore Ravens, so maybe that means Patrick Queen isn't the apple of their eye anymore, so potentially he'd be available. He's a guy who did play at LSU. You're right, Paul Lopa. That's probably what Derek Stingley was tweeting about right there. Look, I'd love to have a middle linebacker. I don't know what he would cost the Texans in terms of salary cap. Let me take a look. Spotrac.com. Patrick Queen contract. 4-year, $12.161 million contract with the Ravens. So is he still on his rookie contract? That would make sense. Did they not pick up his 5th-year option? Is that why this is happening? Patrick Queen. Sorry, everybody. We're just Googling on the fly here. 5th-year option. It's not someone I even thought about, honestly. Patrick Queen. The Ravens have until May 1st to decide whether to exercise the 5th-year option on Queen's rookie deal, which currently runs through 2023. Keeping him around in 2024 would cost a projected $11.6 million. The odds are very low that they would keep, I think, both Queen and Roquan Smith at a long-term contract that's paying a good amount of money. Let's shift into talking about who the Texans might draft on this Gallant Says podcast episode. And I know some of you guys are rolling your eyes. What? The Paul Gallant Show back at Sports Radio 610, the Gallant at Night radio program. This is just all Texans, isn't it? Paul Lopez says Cook's in a 4th for him. Stop. Come on. Sid asks, what free agents do you think the Texans can actually sign? I don't know how many they're going to be able to convince to come here until they actually have a quarterback of the future. So let's talk about some of those potential quarterbacks of the future. If you've been listening to my show on ESPN 97.5 and 92.5, which you can hear weekdays 10 to noon with less swearing and less ADD, though, I mean, there's still a lot of it, you'd hear that I'm looking for the Texans to draft a quarterback who has been through some sort of adversity before. And obviously, you want the guy to be talented. But you also, on top of that, would like the guy to be someone who's shown he's resilient. We have certainly seen that out of Jalen Hurts, who was just playing in a Super Bowl. So before I study the film and before we watch the NFL Combine and before we see pro days and start measuring hand sizes, or in the case of Bryce Young, height, weight, how about we measure the adversity that all of the 3 quarterbacks that are considered to be the top 3 quarterbacks in the draft have been through? This guy is clearly in last place. He was born in Newton, Massachusetts. I used to live close to Newton, Massachusetts. It is an affluent little place. It is perhaps more expensive now than it was when Will Levis was born, but that place is really fucking nice. I lived there in 2011, 2010. During the summer, I was working at a grocery store in North Quincy, Mass. It's very nice in Newton. So he's from there. He went to high school, though, not in Newton, Massachusetts. He went to high school in fucking Connecticut, which is the richest state in the country. I know there's some shady areas. But he went to a high school called Xavier in Connecticut. And on top of that, his adversity was transferring, but he transferred from Penn State, a borderline top shelf college football program. They're probably just on the outside looking in. I don't know, I would say like 12th, 13th or so year to year when it comes to that. He transferred from Penn State to Kentucky, who is in the SEC and maybe has more talent than they've had in years past, but Kentucky is probably like closer to like 20th or something like that. But he played at Kentucky. So Will Levis, guy sounds like a cake eater. Nothing wrong with being a cake eater. I am a cake eater. I grew up and never set foot in one public school over the course of my life. St. Paul's Elementary in Hingham, Massachusetts. Thayer Academy in Braintree for middle school. Shorecrest Preparatory School for high school. College, Syracuse University. I am a cake-eating bougie bitch. I'll admit it. We are what we are. Will Levis has perhaps been through less adversity than me, though. I mean, did Will Levis go through a divorce where he and his mom moved to Florida and his dad and his sister stayed up in Massachusetts? I did. Pat self on the back. So, adversity rankings for potential Texans quarterbacks. Will Levis, third. Paul Gallant, second and a half. Like, I'm not traditionally a quarterback, but, you know, if they need me, I can figure it out. I've done it in flag football before. Number 2. He was born in Philadelphia. You have to be tough if you do that. He is also a guy who's a short king. I mean, if you're not 6 feet tall today, you're kind of fucked. That's why it's so important that I lied on my license and said that I'm 6 feet tall, even though I'm 5'11 and a half. And I just wear cowboy boots a lot. Appropriating Texas culture. Check. Looking a little bit taller for the ladies. Check. It ain't easy being a short king. It's not. And Bryce Young is playing quarterback as a short king while being born in Philadelphia. I mean, that's some adversity. Started as a sophomore. Didn't have the best supporting cast around him at Alabama compared to guys in years past. Like a mediocre offensive line. Didn't have much of a running game. His Heisman season, they were 77th in yards per game, 79th in yards per carry. Plus, he had to work with Bill O'Brien, which I'm sure anyone watching right now who remembers the Bill O'Brien era knows that he can, at the very least, be difficult to work with because he's rather confrontational. He did have a deep wide receiver core with him. I mean, shoot, I can't even off the top of my head name all of the Alabama wide receivers that have been there over the years. Let's just take a look here. Alabama wide receivers. Let's list some guys. Alabama wide receivers. NFL. That's what I'm looking for. Ranking the Alabama wide receivers in the NFL. Jalen Waddle. I forgot he went to Alabama. You've got Jerry Jeudy, Calvin Ridley, Julio Jones, Devontae Smith, Amari Cooper. You have already on the Houston Texans, John Mechie. Yeah, it's pretty loaded, the Alabama wide receivers that are in the NFL. So he worked with some pretty good wide receivers over the past couple of years. But Bryce Young has been through some adversity. He's short, and he was born in Philadelphia. It's cold. It's miserable. Everyone's angry all the time. Some comments, twitch.tv/Gallant says from Bobs_4. I wasn't sold on Jalen Hurts initially, but it feels like they have to draft him. And I think he means Bryce Young. Yes, he means Bryce Young. I was talking about Jalen Hurts originally because he's been through a lot of adversity. Life and Sports Talk with Jake says, just warmed up the leftover spaghetti. Leftover spaghetti cold is actually low-key good. What did I miss? Hey, by the way, Justin Fields to Seattle would be nice. I wonder if they'd want Justin Fields. Fields is intriguing as a prospect. I like his running ability a lot. He doesn't have a lot of receivers to work with. And I think we haven't really had a true indication of what he is as a passer. I think it would be rather expensive for Seattle to trade for Justin Fields, but I do think that Seattle should not be marrying themselves to Geno Smith going forward. Paul Lopa says, I want Bryce Young so we can nickname him the Gremlin. No, don't do that. Why would you call him the Gremlin? Gremlins are ugly. Don't do that. He's already a short king. He's dealing with enough adversity in his life. Josu Cologne says, I feel my quarterback comparison to Bryce Young is Kyler. From a height perspective, maybe. Young is taller than Kyler Murray, I think. But I guess we'll find out at the NFL Combine. Who's better, Bryce Young or Justin Fields, asks Josu Cologne. If I had to pick between the two, I think Fields has shown some remarkable signs of improvement. I think, and I've been listening to an interview he's been doing on Pardon My Take the last couple of days. I think he's smart enough to know how to, protect his body, considering he's one of those big guys. If I had to pick between the two, right now I got to pick Justin Fields. I have to. I don't know what Bryce Young's going to do, and I know in college he was awesome. And, I mean, if I have to roll the dice on one of these three, like right now, I'm probably rolling dice on Bryce Young. But I think that there is a case to be made that Justin Fields is better. Life and Sports Talk with Jake brings up from a Seattle perspective, Hendon Hooker from Tennessee could be an option in the second round for Seattle. Hooker had a great year last year, and it is a shame that he's up there in age, which is the reason that I think he's sort of an afterthought compared to the top guys. And, of course, he tore his ACL, which fucking blows. He would have been in the Heisman. He should have been, honestly, in the Heisman room. I can't stand Tennessee as someone who grew up a Florida Gator fan, but Hendon Hooker was fun this past year, and it really does suck for him that he tore his ACL at the end of the year, and he's left out of the Heisman conversation almost entirely. The guy who's been through the most adversity, so when he was in high school, he was a 3-star recruit. He went to being the 3rd highest recruit. He's from Rancho Cucamonga, which I've never been to. I hear it's maybe not the best, but it does have 287 sunny days a year, which is compared to the national average of 205. But this is why C.J. Stroud's been through the most adversity. His dad's been in jail since he's been in middle school. And I know he went to Ohio State, also had a deep wide receiver core that he worked with, and was consistently playing in a Big Ten program that's better than everybody else from a talent perspective. But that trumps everybody. If we're looking to rank quarterbacks entirely based off of the adversity that they have been through, and we're going to leave Anthony Richardson out and Hendon Hooker out, it's clear C.J. Stroud's number one. He's a man of faith. He says that faith has gotten him through this. I think it's very clear that he's number one. Being a short king from Philadelphia, that's hard, but it's not everything. Sylvester Stallone, how about that? Perez 88 asks, hey Paul, have you heard Josh Innes is moving? Is he coming back to Houston? That would be pretty cool if you and him did a show together. I would love to do a show with him. I don't know if he would love to do a show with me. I do not know. I actually sent him a text, hey, what's happening? And he did not respond to it. I tried to be the first to report on it. He's got weird, and I love you, Josh, but there's some strange trust issues on that front. It's not like I would tell anybody if you were to ask me that and he had told me, but he has not told me. So we'll see. I don't know. I'm happy for him, though. I think he was getting a little bit bored doing the rock scene. I think he likes to talk. Okay, guys, let's transition into another topic. I think that Texas Tech, per capita, as a university, produces the most fun people among all schools in the country. And I am using Patrick Mahomes as my piece of evidence. I could use a bunch of friends that I know here in Texas who are all very fun that went to Texas Tech. You go to a Texas Tech game, it's going to be a little bit more lively than at most college environments in Texas. Texas A&M, it's a different, like, it's family friendly. Like Texas Tech's like salt of the earth in a sinful manner kind of school. And that's what I'm looking for. This was Patrick Mahomes at the Chiefs Super Bowl victory parade yesterday.
Before we started this season, the AFC West said we were rebuilding. I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't know what rebuilding means. In our rebuilding year, we're world champs. We're world champs.
I love Patrick Mahomes. He's really lovable too. Considering he's won 2 Super Bowls, has been to 5 straight AFC championships, has been to 3 Super Bowls, has won 2 MVPs. I don't think we're going to be fatigued with Mahomes anytime soon. I can appreciate greatness. He seems not just like a great quarterback. He actually seems like a fun dude to hang out with. And there are more examples of this. I don't know how many people saw this video This is from right at the end of the Super Bowl where he's in the locker room and I think it's Matt Nagy who comes up to him and he has this to say to Matt Nagy. Hang on a second. Let me refresh it. And here we go.
I don't think so. I think he left it How about this guy, Teddy Cruz? Oh my God. Enjoy it. I'm about to hammer like 100 Coors Lights. Oh.
I'm about to hammer like 100 Coors Lights. The man likes him some beer. I love hearing that. Very relatable. And this isn't the only time that we have heard about Patrick Mahomes drinking beer. I don't know how many of you guys listen to the Pardon My Take podcast. I love it. It's one of my favorites. Big Cat, PFT commenter. It's a Barstool Sports podcast. I think it's the most fun sports show that there is. They had a comedian on by the name of Andrew Santino. I've never checked out Andrew Santino. I clearly have to, but I've never checked him out. I haven't been listening to as much stand-up comedy recently or watching as much stand-up comedy recently as I would like to. Here is what Patrick Mahomes did that impressed Andrew Santino so much.
And he introduced me to Pat. Pat came to my show when I was in Dallas because he's from Texas, and me and Pat and family and friends. And he goes, he came for the first show, and he was like, man, it's so fucking fun. And he goes, all right, well then, where do you want us now? And I was like, oh, well, I'll see you. I'm going to do the second show. You guys go have fun, and I'll see you whenever. And he's like, no, I think we're going to stay for the second show. I was like, oh, okay.
That's sick.
I thought for sure he would dip, but he was like, no, we want to stay. And the server comes up to me, and she's like, that's your party, right? And I was like, yeah, whatever. I'll take care of the bill. Like, whatever it is. She's like, no. We're comping everything anyway. I just want to let you know, we have someone that's going to have to get more Coors Light because Mr. Mahomes has finished all the Coors Light.
He's a Coors Light athlete.
Bro, I'm not kidding when I say this. Maybe 13 the first show.
I love it.
Maybe 10 the second show.
Hell
and
yes.
then we went out.
Yes.
And of course, I remember, you forget, I'm almost 40. He's much younger. So when the shows are done, I'm also tired. I worked. And Pat's like, yo, let's go out. And I'm like, we're out. It's over.
Yeah.
And he's like, no. Zeke is at this club. And of course, I was like, I kind of want to see Zeke.
Yeah, right.
Nightclub. And he was like, you should go. And I was like, my wife's like, you really want to go to this? It's like 2:30. I was like, I do.
Once in a lifetime.
I really fucking do. Yes. Do I want to be pushed around by Ezekiel Elliott's security guard? Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
And did that happen? Yeah, it did. Because they're like, who are these little fucking white dorks trying to get into this all-athlete VIP? And of course, Pat had to be like, no, they're okay. And at one point, I wanted to be like, well, just stay outside the ropes. I don't deserve to be in that thing.
No, I'm going to self-select out of this one. Yeah.
You got to roll. Yeah.
I wanted to opt out. Yeah. But no, that's how I got to know those guys. And then from then, if I'm in a city and they're playing there, and I've kind of started to learn to schedule that sometimes. If I'm like, dude, I'm going to be near there, I'll just jump a flight and go. And so my wife and I will go to games and we'll go see them. And I love them, dude. It's fun. And no one.
He's Patrick Mahomes. Very friendly seeming. And even as someone who grew up a Patriots fan who's a little paranoid of the fact that Patrick Mahomes seems to be on track to potentially overtaking Tom Brady, he's so likable. He really is. And I feel like he is on brand for Texas Tech folks. I think a lot of Texas Tech people are like that. A couple of comments here. YouTube.com/Paul Gallant. Perez88 says, you got to go to Life is Too Short by Santino. He's fucking hilarious. The Bad Friends podcast is hilarious. Yeah, I'll check it out. Bobs_4, not so sold on twitch.tv/Gallant says his stand-up show was all right. A couple other comments. This has to go back to Lamar Jackson. No, thank you. He is like a car that has 145,000 miles. I mean, he's an awesome car with 145,000 miles. I don't know if he's, Japanese made. Those cars seem to last until they have 350,000 miles on them based off of the first two cars I had. I had a Toyota Corolla that had 250,000 miles on it, and I didn't take care of it, so it ended up dying eventually. I had an old Camry. I had an old Honda. Those cars last for fucking ever. All of them had 180,000 miles plus on them. 91 Honda. I was driving that like in 2011, 2012. Problem was there was this bubble that would pop up in the ignition, and I would have to like physically shake the car to start it from time to time. It sucked. It's the worst. What else do we have here? Cleaning up some comments before I continue showing you why Patrick Mahomes and Texas Tech people are the best. Don't you agree we're going to need a legit number one wide receiver for Bryce Young that can bail him out on 3rd and long? Look at Josh Allen with Diggs, A.J. Brown with Jalen Hurts. Yeah, they need a legit receiver, period. I think that Brandon Cooks, the idea that he'll be here next season is bad. I don't want him on the team after all the bullshit last year. And while I'm excited for John Mechie, I mean, the guy's coming off of torn ACL, leukemia too. Like, fuck. It's a lot. So, tempering my expectations with him. But he was a 2nd-round pick. I am hopeful, that's for sure. Nico Collins did not make the jump year 2 that I was hoping for out of him, but I also think you have to factor in the quarterbacks that the Texans had. Davis Mills was not good. He just wasn't, and I do not want that guy to be there next year. Perez88 says, Lamar is a Ford with 145,000 miles on it. I don't think Fords last very long. I'm not a car expert, though. Anyway, I want to go back into talking about Patrick Mahomes and why he is the best. This is an interview that he did with Cooper Manning, who has weirdly become like a feature on the Fox Sports broadcasts of the NFL. You know, the Acho brothers, one's on ESPN, one's on Fox. Okay, I guess they can put some thoughts together. Peyton Manning and Eli Manning are the only Mannings that anybody wants to hear from. And Cooper Manning was a good player back in the day, you know, before he suffered a neck injury. But it's weird that Cooper Manning has become like the fun part of Fox broadcasts. I don't get it. I don't think he's particularly entertaining. Anyway, here he is before the Super Bowl for Cooper's cam. He's wearing a cowboy hat and a vest. I think there's a bolo tie there. And he's interviewing Patrick Mahomes.
It's good seeing you, man.
I can let you borrow these boots.
So I'm saying, I have a couple boots myself.
Do you?
I'm from Texas. I have a few.
I know. I was going to ask you. What are these made of? I don't even know.
Pause for a second. So I found out today, apparently some people do tuck their jeans into their boots. I guess that if you work in oil and gas, if you got the steel-toed boots on, you're supposed to. And I guess if you're hunting rattlesnakes, you're supposed to. But, like, I don't know, man. If you're out at Radio Row interviewing somebody, you're not supposed to tuck the fucking jeans into your boots. I'm a Metro Yankee. Bobs_4, twitch.tv/Gallant says, I thought only chicks did that. Yes, I thought only chicks did it too. And generally they're like knee-high boots and they're wearing a skirt or something like that, or jorts. You know? I'm with you. This is not the kind of look that the guy should have. And look, as somebody who in the past has fucked up himself and worn skinny jeans and put the boots underneath it, and the skinny jeans were over the top of the boots. Like, I have learned the hard way. I'm not exactly the best fashionista. I learned through getting shamed by my friends. Anyway, here's more Patrick Mahomes with Cooper Manning. Let's move past the boots.
No idea. I'm not a boot expert, but I have some just in case I go to like a country concert or something like that.
Would these work in Lubbock?
Oh, 100%. I've seen probably that exact pair in Lubbock, actually.
Yeah. Fill it up with cold beer, and the rest is history.
Yeah, cold Coors Light, that is.
Is that right?
Yeah,
okay,
cold
good.
Coors Light, you know, that's about, I would say probably about 5 of them.
That's our post-Super Bowl plan.
That's post-Super Bowl. If you bring that thing there, we get the win, I'll drink the beer out the booth with you.
You can have the left and I'll have the right, and we'll be done.
Yeah, but I got to make sure you, like, wash your socks before we do that.
I would love to see Patrick Mahomes drink a beer out of Das Boot, like one of the German Das Boots. You got to do the twist at the end. I learned that from the movie Beer Fest. Anyway, as far as fun people that I've interacted with by college, on average, Texas Tech is number 1. It's number 1. Close number 2 is Washington State. That's why I picked Washington State when I was up in Seattle. Wazoo is a fun fucking school. I went there once. It was, I think, Father's Weekend. Good time. Honorable mention, but they scare the shit out of me. People who went to Texas State. I feel like every time I go to a party with people from Texas State, like cocaine's going to find itself out in the open. And I'm like, all right. Things are getting aggressive. Just a little bit aggressive. Before we hit the road, two more things I wanted to do. I want to do a segment called Throwback Thursday on Thursdays. We'll do more detailed dives as we get further and further away from football season. But 100 years ago today, King Tut was discovered, guys. The mummy of King Tut, buried in Thebes, Egypt. English archaeologist Howard Carter entered the sealed burial chamber of King Tutankhamun. And look, Egyptians, as this little write-up says, you can see it, twitch.tv/GallantSays or youtube.com/PaulGallant. Because the ancient Egyptians saw their pharaohs as gods, they carefully preserved their bodies after death, burying them in elaborate tombs containing rich treasures to accompany the rulers into the afterlife. In the 19th century, archaeologists from all over the world flocked to Egypt, where they uncovered a number of these tombs. Many had long ago been broken into by robbers and stripped of their riches. When Carter arrived in Egypt in 1891, he was convinced there was at least one undiscovered tomb of King Tut. And Jesus, 30 years later, Carter's team found him. Cool, right? Well, here's what happened afterwards. Despite rumors that a curse would befall anyone who disturbed the tomb, its treasures were carefully cataloged, removed, and included in a famous traveling exhibition called The Treasures of Tut. Leave it to the fucking limeys who, by the 1920s, were starting to have their empire dwindle to start taking people's shit and hawking it as their own. These fuckers. And look, I'm an American, so by default, even though we're like friends with the English, I'm from Boston. So, we were the first people to rebel against the English. So there's that. I'm of Irish descent. I'm of French-Canadian descent. I'm of Scottish descent. Like, all of my blood hates the English because they always take what's not theirs. And they're like, look at us. It's me, Lord Cobblestone. And I have taken from the tomb of King Tut all of the riches and gold because it's mine by right. As an Englishman, the sun never sets on the British Empire. Fuck you. I hate England. It's an irrational hate, but we all have our irrational hates, right? Before we hit the road, the last thing I wanted to dive into, and this will be spoiler light. That's the wrong sound effect. Hang on. There we go. That is the spoiler alert horn, everybody. If you hear this, that means there might be some television show spoilers. I've been watching The Last of Us. The most recent episode of Last of Us was titled Endure and Survive. This is the episode where The Last of Us became my favorite television show currently on. If you watch the episode, it's not just because you finally see how fucking scary the zombies / fungi people, diseased, infected. It's not just about how scary they are. The best part about this show isn't even the humor, which has, I think, been a great part of it. There's legitimately funny moments. Pedro Pascal, who plays Joel, and Bella Ramsey, who plays Ellie, have pretty good chemistry with one another. You might remember them from Game of Thrones as Oberyn and Lyanna Mormont. The best part about this show is that they are not afraid to kill off characters, including characters played by actors that you would think would have some sort of plot armor. That's a big problem with pretty much all television. I liked Game of Thrones not because of the fantasy element of it. I liked Game of Thrones because crazy shit would happen out of nowhere. And it was always shocking to you because it would like punch you in the fucking gut. It was just so different from TV to see a character just get killed off in the middle of episode 2 of a season or episode 4. Like, people you came to like. I like this guy. And that's what I think, unfortunately, got lost on Game of Thrones. They stopped being able to throw 180 miles per hour. A lot of characters that became fan favorites got plot armor, and they were chicken shit to write them off. And everyone started surviving practically until the last episode. they could have made the last couple of seasons of Game of Thrones a lot better if they killed off people along the way. And I get that maybe they were trying to stay true to what George R.R. Martin was going to do with the books, but those books were never going to come out. They had carte blanche in that spot. They had a complete carte blanche. I think that works. They had a blank canvas. That works to do what they wanted, and they didn't. But in this situation with this Last of Us TV show, you have seen characters played by actor Nick Offerman, you might know from Parks and Rec, among other shows. And this week, Melanie Linsky, who plays Kathleen, who you think is going to be like a intimidating figure, like it ain't no thing. By the way, Melanie Linsky is in the TV show on Showtime, Yellow Jackets. I encourage you to check it out. It's a very good show. I don't know when Yellow Jackets season 2 is coming out, but think like, it's essentially a movie about like a plane crash with a soccer team. So it's like Lord of the Flies with like high school age girls as opposed to kids, male children, like in that one. Anyway, I highly recommend that you watch The Last of Us if you have HBO. I've really enjoyed it. I think it's the best TV show currently on. That's going to wrap up today's edition of the Gallant Says podcast. Big thanks to everybody who tuned in. If you haven't already, subscribe to the actual podcast version of the show. I know some of you guys are podcast listeners. We do this thing every single day, so you can watch it too. I feel like my facial expressions do make this show a little bit better, and the interactions that we have, youtube.com/Paul Gallant, twitch.tv/Gallant Says Live, do make this podcast unique, but you can listen to it in podcast form too on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. If you haven't already, subscribe, rate, leave a review, leave a roast. I'll read it. I am merely Paul Gallant. So long, farewell. Have yourselves a wonderful Thursday. We'll be back at it with a Friday edition tomorrow at 1 o'clock. So long, farewell. I think I said